Right, well, greetings everyone. I want to greet you with lots of love, peace, and positivity. And today, I believe it's October 5th, and I'm on my way to work here today. It's Thursday. I actually thought it was Wednesday, but this week has been going by so very quickly. And happy to be with y'all. Hope you've been doing well. And in this video, I want to talk about Cam Newton. He's a very well-known NFL football player, National Football League player. He's considered to be a star. Some would say superstar. He had a rough season last year and another. Got off to a rocky start this year. And recently, he had an exchange with a female beat writer, and he made some comments that were sexist in nature. And I want to talk about sexism in this video. I'm actually running a little bit behind here, just a little bit. Okay, so let me put a little more gas into this engine, see if we can get there a little quicker. Also, want to thank everyone who tuned into yesterday's live stream. What I'm doing is, since I'm working a full-time job now, on the way to work, I just basically set up my camera and I talk with y'all and chat with y'all for a while. So this is a way to stay connected and utilize my time as efficiently as possible. Sexism is a huge issue. It's an issue that has been going on for a lot longer than most other major issues. As an example, even racism as a major issue hasn't been around as significantly as long as sexism. Sexism is rooted, especially against women. Sexism is rooted in the notion that men are superior to women. In many cases, like for a long time, I would say that it was the notion that men were superior to women intellectually. That was a lot of I guess you could say, the propaganda associated with sexism in the more modern era. But it's deeper than that, you know. I mean, it goes all the way across the board, including in sports. I think sports is kind of like one of the major areas wherein sexism plays a major role. As an example, in general, and this isn't a sexist statement, this is a statement of fact. Men tend to have more physical strength, physical dexterity in general. They tend to outperform women when it comes to sports. And this is true. It's a statement of fact. There's nothing sexist about that. Now, there are some women who are much more athletic than I am, who are much stronger than I am. Okay? They can play basketball better than I ever was able to be able to play. They can football too. I'm sure that there are some women who probably could play football better than. But I'm saying that in general, that men, when in the world of sports, men tend to be better equipped physically to perform in the sports world compared to women. This is a statement of fact. But the problem is when women are demeaned and disrespected because of that, without looking at other aspects of what women bring to the table in terms of physically. And what I mean by that is that oftentimes there are men who would say that women are inferior simply because maybe they don't necessarily play a particular sport as well as most men. It's still sexist, and even though there's some truth to the you know, there's truth to be said when we talk about physical strength and physical dexterity in general, just as a generalization. But to use that generalization as a way or as a means to say that somehow women are inferior to men physically, I think that is backwards. Let's look at this another way. Women are able to conceive of children. They are able to maturate life in their womb for 9 months. They are able to go through the three stages of labor, and then they're able to give birth. I mean, we can go deeper than that. They're able to provide food, meaning breast milk, for the baby. Men can't do any of that. And in my opinion, that's much more important than being able to play some sports. Now, do we take that fact as this a statement of fact? It's not sexist against men. Women have the ability, physical ability, to actually create life. And that doesn't, I mean, you can't compare sports to that. Sports is silliness, you know. And, you know, I like sports to a degree, you know, especially basketball. But compare that to life. My wife's just giving birth to 5 children. I've delivered my last 3 with my own hands. Trust me, I know what it's all about. It's profound. You can't compare that to playing sports. But now, what do? Do we say that because women have that ability and men do not, that somehow women are superior to men physically? No, I don't think that's the appropriate. I think that's backwards. Okay, so you see my point? we can look at this different ways. The point is that when we talk about Cam Newton's comments that he made towards this female beat writer, I'm very impartial because I recognize that it's just sports in the first place. And then on a deeper level, it speaks to the fact that we still maintain sexist ideas about women based upon our affiliations with sports. And sports is largely dominated by men, not just in terms of the athletes, but also in terms of management, ownership of teams, professional sports teams all around the world, in terms of coaches. Okay, it goes. Trainers. It goes. It goes all the way across the board. Sports is mainly dominated by men. Now the problem is and if you haven't heard, Cam Newton, he's a quarterback, an African American quarterback, which is fascinating too because it speaks to the truth that while black African American sports athletes, they can talk about, let's say, injustices against black folk, but then they still maintain sexist ideas against women. That's the one thing when it comes to trying to get equality, so forth and so on. People are very selective about that. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about the system and quote unquote white supremacy. We're going to talk about white privilege. We're going to talk about racism against black folk, but we still maintain sexist ideologies. And not just towards women, but towards black women, bitches, hoes, maggots. You see my point? We're very selective, very selective. It's not very balanced, and it's not very rational. But to get to the point, so Cam Newton, he's being interviewed. I think it was after the game. I don't know if this was on Sunday. I'm thinking it's Sunday. It might have been a Monday night game. I don't know. But he was being interviewed, and there was a female beat writer who asked a question. And I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it had to do with the Cam Newton's main wide receiver, at least his main wide receiver now, who happens to be really good too. She was asking questions about him, and then she asked another question, or she asked this question, and Cam Newton, and I'm paraphrasing here, okay? I don't know exactly what he said. I should have written it down. It was a car accident right here. That's why there's so much traffic. That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to do these live streams. I'm not trying to look at the screen. I'm not trying to read no comments because I've never been in an accident in my life, and y'all not about to get me caught up in no accident ever. I've been driving since I was 16, and I'm 41 now. So we keeping that streak alive. Okay? But anyway, Cam Newton, he responds. It's the lady who asked the question, and he responds by saying, I don't mean to laugh. It's just so ridiculous. I'm not laughing at the fact that it was sexist. I'm laughing at the fact that he was able to say something like that and how ignorant it was. But the other thing is this. So he says it's funny to hear a female or a woman ask questions about such and such. And I think he's talking about a very specific play. It's phrased a certain type of way. And she asks a question about that play. He goes, I'm not laughing at the second. I'm laughing for him to say this. He goes, it's funny. He smiles. He says, it's funny to hear a woman ask about such and such, such and such. And so the idea was women really don't know about this. So for them to even ask, it's funny to him. Okay. Not a good look, homie. It's not an intelligent, even if you feel that way, don't say stuff like that. But the truth is, and this is the thing I want to get to for you all out there. This is why, even though people they feel like it's a big deal, it's only a big deal in a sense that it's a problem, sexism. But in terms of him saying it, it's not a big deal because most men have that attitude. In general. And even if you want to be even more specific, most men, when it comes to sports, as it relates to women performing in sports, women commenting about sports, women reporters, anchors, so forth and so on. Most men believe that, and they think that way when it comes to women. That's the interesting thing. Let's look at this even deeper. I find it to be fascinating because people are blowing out of proportion. I think it's being blown out of proportion in the sense that they're focusing on the fact that Cam Newton is the one who said it. But really what they should be focusing on is the fact that many men, and it's true, most men have sexist views about women, myself included. So what tends to happen is that when a high profile person, sports athletes, a politician, Donald Trump talking about grabbing vaginas, Donald Trump making these comments, you don't get much more sexist than him, okay? But because it's high profile, Stephen A. Smith making comments about domestic violence were completely backwards. He made comments about domestic violence and how women need to be careful not to escalate the situations. I grew up in a household where domestic violence was very common. My father beat my mother. He also beat us too, but he beat my mother in extreme ways. And when I heard Stephen A. Smith's comments, I said, that's some of the most backwards. But you don't say that kind of stuff unless you have sexist views about women, because no level of abuse can you justify it by simply saying, well, the woman should escalate it. Or if a child is being abused, the child shouldn't escalate it. No, you focus on the fact that there's abuse taking place and the man is wrong. What's wrong is wrong. Stephen A. Smith didn't do that. He got caught up and he got really twisted up. Okay? What I'm saying is that in general, men have those types of views. We don't want to admit it, but it's true. We're raised in a culture of sexism. It's a global culture of sexism. Most men don't realize it because we've been raised in it. Most women know that this is true because they experience it every single day. It's something as simple as you're trying to walk down the street and a man is looking at you, looking you up and down and whistling or making sexist or sex-related comments. That's sexism too. Or someone saying, well, women can't perform this particular job, or they don't have the mental capacity to perform this job, or they can't be, business owners. I mean, people have this type of mentality about women. Most men don't realize it, and there are some women don't realize it because they've been raised in it, and there are many women who realize it because they have to deal with it every single day. And these are things that we can't understand because we haven't experienced. Same thing with, a lot of black folk. A lot of folk can relate to what black folk experience when it comes to police brutality, because police brutality in terms of for white folk is not as common. And I know there's some white people who would say, well, black people need to stop doing all the crime. It's not an issue of crime. It's not. It's an issue of certain police officers looking at African American or black folk in a particular way and treating them in a different way based upon how they look at them. I'm not a person who's committed crimes or anything like that, but I have been harassed by the police. And it's not because I was doing anything wrong. It's because I looked a certain way and I fit a particular description. It's called racial profiling, which is illegal, but they still do it. I've had that experience myself. Was it because I'm committing crimes? No. But other groups of people may not necessarily understand what that feels like because they don't have to deal with it every single day. You see my point? Well, the same thing applies to sexism as it relates to what women have to go through every single day. And men, we don't want to admit that. A lot of us, we don't want to admit that. And we don't want to admit that women have that struggle. And many of us, we don't want to admit that we have sexist views about women. I'll be the first person to admit right here, right now, that I have sexist views about women. And I've had some extreme sexist views about women in the past, but I've gotten better. And I'm working on that. You see? Now, the problem, to get back, I'm sorry for going off on a tangent. But the problem with how media is taking the Cam Newton situation is, in the first place, and I don't want anyone, please don't take this the wrong way, but Cam Newton is not necessarily the most intellectually gifted person. Okay, I'm not trying to disparage him as a human being. I'm simply saying that his mentality and how he thinks at the age of 28 is really no more different than what most 28-year-old males, how they think and how they intellectualize things. I'm not saying that they're less than, or because I used to be there too not too long ago. I'm just saying, for a 28-year-old man, I'm not surprised by those comments. It's just that Cam Newton wasn't savvy enough to keep his mouth closed. Whereas a lot of other men we will not say how we feel when it comes to sexist views. A lot of us, we will say it, but under that type of situation where, we're being interviewed, it's on the world stage, people all over the world are watching. He wasn't savvy enough, and he didn't have the type of self-discipline to not say what he was thinking at that time. But I'm sure if afterwards, after he thought about it, he said, I shouldn't have said that, even if he believed that to be true. You see? I don't look at it as being something that is so serious. His statement, I don't look at his statement as being serious. I look at what's serious is the fact that sexism exists. That's all. Because his mentality is no different than most males. What he said is not much different than what most males would say. We don't want to admit that. So, after those comments, there was a firestorm. And I want to say something else too. And I hope I didn't phrase that the wrong way. It's not that Cam Newton is not intelligent, because he's actually well spoken. I'm just saying that when it comes to social issues, when it comes to sexism, when it comes to having PR public relations savviness. He just doesn't have that quite yet, because obviously he wouldn't have made those comments in that situation if he had that type of an understanding and awareness of the type of impact that was going to have. I mean, literally, he lost a major endorsement because of those comments. So he's messing up his money as an example. He's messing up money because he didn't have enough discipline and enough savvy and enough intelligence to say, okay, I should not say that, so I'm not going to say that. And he had plenty of time to stop himself, rephrase or restate or apologize, whatever. He didn't do that. So what I found to be interesting was that when I thought about what he said, I don't think that he meant it to be sexist. I really don't think, even though it's a sexist comment, I don't think he meant it for it. I think he was trying to be funny. And that's why he smiled before he said it, and then he smiled after he said it. He was trying to be funny, but no one laughed. That's what I'm saying, that there's a lack of proper intellectualism on his part, because he should have known what type of response he was going to get based upon the statement that he made. No one laughed, and then afterwards, it's been a major issue. Everyone's talking about it. He lost out an endorsement. He's probably going to lose a couple more endorsements before all is said and done. And hopefully, he has a PR team in place that's going to help him to at least rectify some of the damage, damage control. But the point that I want to get to here is that the issue is really not Cam Newton. The issue is that sexism is a problem, and it's an ongoing problem, and he doesn't necessarily represent anything extraordinary. Many of the people who have made comments about him in the sports world and talking about why he shouldn't, they are sexist themselves. If you're watching porn, you're sexist. If you're calling women bitches and hoes, you're sexist. Or any derogatory term. If you look at women simply as sex objects to be dominated sexually, you're sexist too. If you have thoughts about women being inferior to you on any level, intellectually, emotionally, physically, what have you, you're sexist. So how many men can we say have those types of views? I know this isn't an easy topic, but how many men have those types of views? So many of us have those types of views, or have had. So it's not anything extraordinary. It's just that because he's high profile, meaning Cam Newton, the manner in which people respond to it, it's a lot different than if it was, under normal circumstances, like every single day, like it is happening every single day. Does this justify the behavior? No, that's not what I'm saying here. What I am saying is that sexism is an issue that has existed long before Cam Newton made his comments, and it's going to exist long after, until such time that we really begin to address the issue of sexism. And the problem is that most males don't want to address sexism because it puts them in an advantaged position. And to admit sexism also proves that men have a lot to do in terms of rectifying sexism in and of itself. It's funny. I'm at work right now. I'm sorry, I got a little off track there because my connection was going out, and I have 7 minutes before I got to get in here. But I saw someone's commenting, because I can't see comments while I'm driving. I'm not looking, and someone was getting upset. There's nothing to see. That's the thing. I just want to let this be the last thing. Men, you have a problem, and I'm assuming it's a male. I know it's a male because you have a problem, and the problem is that you don't want to deal with your own sexist mentality. That's what the problem is. Yes, I see. You have a problem with dealing with your own sexist mentality. And see, the reason why most men don't recognize it is because it's part of how we are raised as men. And that's why it's so difficult for us to even look at ourselves in the mirror and ask questions about our sexist views about women. See, I would hope that Cam Newton begins to, at some point, look at his sexist views. And this is true. This is true. We have to be willing to look at our sexist views, but most of us, we don't want to do that. And one of the things that we tend to do is that when the topic is brought up, we can become very uncomfortable, and then we begin to become negative towards the person who brings it up. And this will be the last point because I got 5 minutes. It reminds me of racism. The same thing applies. People who don't want to look at their own racist beliefs, when you bring up racism, they become very uncomfortable and they become very defensive, and then they begin to try to verbally attack the person who is talking about sexism, not realizing that the issue is, that's talking about racism, not realizing that the issue is not the person who's bringing it up. The issue is racism itself. Same thing applies to sexism. Again, Cam Newton's comments are not extraordinary. In fact, I would propose that most men have those types of views about women. It may not necessarily be in terms of sports, but it will be in some area because we're raised that way. Cam Newton's comments are not extraordinary. You have people like Donald Trump who's made similar types of comments over the years. There's nothing extraordinary. Again, if you're watching porn, you abide to sexist ideology. You may not necessarily be high profile, and people may not necessarily be thinking about the fact that you're watching porn, but you must have some sort of sexist ideology if you watch porn. But we don't like to deal with that as men. It's a very uncomfortable topic. We want to hold on to the sexist ideology because it does put us in an advantaged position. All I'm saying here is that as men, if you want to be a man of integrity, that one of the things that you can begin to do is look at your own sexist views, sexist ideology, and begin to rectify it over time. Again, I've had sexist ideology. I still have sexist ideology, and I've been working towards that and working on rectifying those things. But also, I'm not a coward. I'm not going to be unwilling to look at myself in the mirror and ask the question, what do I need to do in order to improve upon my mentality about women? I've been doing that for a very long time, and I would encourage everyone to do the same, including Cam Newton. He most definitely needs to do that. And I would encourage y'all to do that as well. Okay, I got to go. Y'all about to make me late. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll talk with y'all tomorrow. Y'all take care. Peace.